Welcome to the Supply Chain Pioneers podcast, where we highlight industry leaders on the forefront of innovation and technology in planning, procurement, and logistics. Hosted by your supply chain pro to know, Ulf Venn.
Supply Chain Pioneers is powered by Everstream Analytics. Everstream gives you the predictive insights and analytics to make your supply chain faster, smarter, safer, and leaner. Go to everstream.ai to book your demo today. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Supply Chain Pioneers. And today with me is Sunder Balakrishnan, who's passionate about supply chain, AI, and a lot of good logical thinking. And he works at LatentView as a director of supply chain analytics. And with that, I want to say, welcome, Sundar.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to join you in this conversation. I look forward to a good conversation as we speak through this.
Perfect. Yeah, Sundar, I'm looking forward to this as well. But before we really start deep diving on your life, on LatentView, and a lot of other good things, let's maybe you quickly introduce yourself.
Certainly. Hi, my name is Sunder Balakrishnan. I live in Mumbai on the west coast of India. Supply chain and, like I say, good old logical thinking and applying data analytics to that discipline is something I'm passionate about. Been in this industry about 18 years, cutting across consulting, working on the ground in the field, and gathering all the learning experiences that we do. I also have the advantage or the pleasure of working across 4 industry verticals: consumer product, retail, industrial, automotive, and tech, and the cross-learning that we can get from these. Outside of work, I have a family here in India. I have a daughter who I enjoy spending time with, and then some other passions that I passionately follow.
Good. Yeah, and one of these we get to know later as well. Short cliffhanger for everybody out there. Anyway, let's first talk about and how you ended up being in LatentView. And we start with your first beginnings, the rootings of your supply chain management career. So you tipped your toes in various roles, from analyst to sales to marketing. Eventually, you drove forward your career as a consultant. But what was your motivation to be a supply chain consultant instead of all these other roles that you were tipping your toes in? What drove you as a person to have that passion?
Like you said, I've done a fair few roles in a few different companies. It's almost to say that there are some roles that challenge your brain, that there are some roles that speak to your heart, but there are only a few roles that actually get both of these working together on a role. And I felt as I navigated my career, if I had to summarize my career into what I have done, I would think data-driven process improvements is what I have done through most of my career. But when that started applying specifically to supply chain as a domain, this really started clicking, and that kind of felt like that's my calling. I think what I love about the supply chain is that it's all real. It's all happening on the ground. And that's where you need to be spending time helping people take better decisions. And that, I think, was one of the key drivers for me to start unpacking this a bit more every time. And the more I unpacked, the more I found myself diving in a bit deeper. Just 3 weeks back, I was traveling. I was in Chile, and we had an opportunity to visit a fulfillment center. I was like jumping at the chance at it because there's so much to learn when you're on the ground, looking at the marriage of data with processes. It's just brilliant. And I think that was my calling.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good calling because I think every data point, right, in supply chain has a human behind it that essentially created something or created the data point itself. And that goes for every data point that's accurate, but also every data point that might be inaccurate. All of them have an individual story, which is quite interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Obviously, engineering processes very much part of your work, and you started working with this already in Infosys back in the days, where you tried to do process engineering, especially on an improvement through data analytics. I feel it's a core competency that essentially applies to nearly all positions that you can have. So what was your initial approach back in the days when you worked at, and then how maybe as being a seasoned expert now, how maybe has your approach changed over time?
There are a few different pieces to this, but just before Infosys, I worked in the software industry, developing software for about 2, 3 years. Found it fun, but I felt like I needed to get a bit more of a management thinking hat going. So I did my MBA. And straight out of MBA, I had the opportunity to work in retail on the ground. So, to your point about the human who takes the decisions based on their data, I was that human who was taking certain decisions and learning so much along the way as we were going through that. I did feel though that when you get into operations, you start getting into the day to day of it, but somewhere you also need to have the ability to maybe take a step back, look at it as a bigger picture, an end to end picture. So when the Infosys opportunity came and it allowed me to now apply data thinking plus process thinking, I said, you know what, that sounds really exciting. I didn't have a clue what I was getting into when I did. It's not like I can say, "No, I knew perfectly well this is the role." Sometimes you take some of these risks just based on a gut feel as well as some understanding of the role. So I got in. I think that playing field was such an amazing playing field at Infosys. I spent 5 years over there. I spent it in process consulting. So I was working with business stakeholders, client stakeholders, trying to define their processes, trying to understand. For example, I worked with a client where their customer service technician visiting a customer meant that it was $150 cost to the organization. So every time you said, just send a technician, it was not just send a technician, it was $150 of a technician cost that either the customer had to pay or the company had to bear, one way or another. So that got us thinking in terms of cost optimization to say, how can we solve customer issues with the least possible cost, given everything we know about the customer's problems, everything we know about how our process runs, and all the constraints that are there with that. I was able to apply it to about 3 different product groups within that customer organization, including an entirely new product that they were launching at the time. This was 2013, 14. I had an opportunity to travel to the US, be co-located with the customer, see the launch of the product. All of that, I think, became formative in the way I thought about processes. It's funny you say this. Back then, we called it business process management. Today, it has evolved into what we call agentic AI in the AI space. But the fundamentals of this were still back then. Just a couple of hours back, I was having a chat with my team and we were discussing a particular use case. And we were talking about this customer problem that we are trying to solve. We actually went back to drawing the process out, much like I used to do in Infosys, actually charting out the entire workflow, how to think through different steps. And now let's see how to apply data analytics, AI, whatever you will, to that same core process. That thinking got formed, I think, in my Infosys days. I'm thankful for that in many ways.
Yeah. And then after having a long time at Infosys, 5 years, you went over to PWC where you did something adjacent, but not really the same, where you focused then on digital strategy and analytics, right? So from process engineering to digital strategy, but still the analytics component. So with that, you got involved in value chain
Yep.
processes, but especially in procure to pay as a process. So what were some of the key challenges you saw that the big value chain might face, but then also specific the supply chain functions like procurement might face when it comes to their digital strategy? And especially right now with AI
Yeah.
rising, I think that this even might have changed everything
Yeah.
again.
Very interesting question. So I think from Infosys to PWC, a few things turned up a couple of notches. As I was moving out of Infosys and moving into PwC, one of my ex bosses at Infosys, and I still remember this, he told me that, hey, when you go into an organization like that, just remember that the first 6 to 8 months will be really challenging because you're trying to step up your game on so many levels. If you're used to a rhythm and a pace, you're now going to take on a role that is slightly wider and has more breadth in the number of things you'll have to do. Also, you're getting into spaces like, for example, digital strategy. This was fairly new back then. Talk about 2015. So these were spaces that I was going to venture into, which I had not done in the past, and there were few in the market who were doing. So he said the first 6 months will be incredibly tough, but you somehow navigate that. Once you do, then it will start feeling more at home to do a lot of that. So I think one of the first challenges was just in terms of diving in and immersing myself into understanding and learning so many aspects of end-to-end businesses. I think the nature of stakeholders we interacted with and worked with in PwC also changed as against Infosys. Infosys being more of a core technology player, a lot of our interactions with customer stakeholders used to be on the technology and a little bit on the process side. With PwC, it started also becoming that you were interacting with commercial functions, procurement functions, apart from process teams and technology teams. So there was that additional interesting challenge and learning in terms of working with them. I remember one particular project which was quite fascinating when I was working on it in PwC, that there was this organization was trying to set up its digital strategy and roadmap. They had a high level vision that was set up at a 30,000 feet level. And they had surveyed people on the ground to get some 75 different projects that were priority. Now they were trying to figure out how to marry these two boxes. One that said something as high level as you need a single source of truth. Of course you do. But what do I do with that recommendation if I can't action it? And then projects that were very granular. So we had this unique job of trying to bring down that strategy down to more operational strategy of concrete things you had to do and measure the value of it, but also then look at what's happening on the ground and tie it to projects that are actually actionable. So that is a pretty interesting experience, both in inventory management, procure to pay, and lead to cash. All these three domains were areas that we touched as a part of it. One additional thing was master data management. That was one of the first times I experienced having to ensure data quality. And it was a pretty significant program that we got pretty deep into around these processes in order to enable AI and other applications. So yeah, that was a pretty interesting experience at PwC.
Yeah. And now, having focused on value chain and even super deep dive on supply chain, I think it's pretty clear to say, once you were committed to supply chain, you just stayed there, Frank. You doubled down. How did you realize that working in supply chain is what you wanted? And we already talked a little bit about the passion, but maybe what was the moment that made you realize it? Like this.
I think one of the very first engagements I did when I was at Force 5 Intelligence, the organization I worked for before LatentView, was for a US food and beverage manufacturer. And we were trying to do a discovery study for being able to highlight risks in the supply chain to them. That was the kind of problem statement. Now, instead of approaching it as a pure play, let's just take some technology and let's highlight risks, we said, let's sit and do a bit of a discovery study with them. And that's where that was the first time I designed what I continue to call a day in the life framework. So I took a framework, I traveled to the US, I spent about 3 weeks with both their headquarter teams. I also did visits to their fulfillment centers to study and understand how processes work, but also build some empathy with the people who are taking decisions on the ground and how they had to currently deal with the risks. What was the ecosystem available to them, and what were the reasons they were succeeding or failing? I think that empathy building exercise of having done that similar role myself also in the past, but being able to now look at it from the other side of the table and appreciate it, I think that clicked something. I would also call out that one of the senior directors on the client side, I still consider him to be one of my mentors, who the way he guided that project and the way he guided my thinking was immense for me. So a lot of these factors that came together really clicked to say, you know what, this is what I want to retire doing if I can, if companies will have me do this. So I think that was a turning point for me to get really deep into it. And I did that exercise, similar exercise for multiple parts of their business about 3 different times. But subsequently, we also had opportunities to visit automotive factory floors and understand processes. It's just beautiful to even be there and be that immersed. That kind of clicked for me.
Yes. Very nice, actually. And sure, companies wanted to have you do supply chain. So that's pretty clear. You already talked about being at course of 5.5. So there, it's an AI and analytics provider looking to deliver trustworthy intelligence. I would say probably that's where you spurred your real passion and interest for AI and machine learning solutions. The product seems to have a very concrete use case in supply chain planning, which is another element of the supply chain, frankly. And it goes often hand in hand with massive transformation projects for companies, right? Because supply chain planning often changes everything. If you change anything there, you transform your whole supply chain. Given a big blocker of AI seems to be the transformative nature it has, right? Because everything changes with AI and there might be hesitancy and so on and so forth. How were you able to help clients at an early stage of AI where not everybody could go to ChatGPT and just test it out to overcome the barrier of, hey, not only do I have to change supply chain planning, which changes everything, but also have to apply AI, which is a new thing. How did you work with clients on that?
I would think there are broadly 4 buckets of work that you have to do with the client, with stakeholders, in order to make any AI program successful. And I think it's when I start narrating these 4, it'll start becoming very obvious that obviously these are the 4. But I think the discipline of doing it is what makes it or breaks it. I think the very first thing that and I did back then, I continue to do so now, is what are your business problems and the use cases associated with it. You take AI as a hammer and then start hitting every nail. AI is not the solution to every problem out there. So, one, you identify the right problem to solve with AI. And 2, you identify problems that are important to customers and solve them whether with AI or without AI. Sometimes the problem is very simply just build a visibility tool to ensure users know what's going on in the business. You don't need any fancy AI to do it, but solving meaningful problems. I think that is the very first step. And we immerse ourselves, we spend time to try and discover the right problems to solve, both in terms of being able to articulate the problem, also being able to articulate that if I did solve this problem, who will it benefit? What will be the metric that it will improve? And by how much is it likely to improve? We try and see if we can get an estimation for it, whether in planning or in execution. The second is just data and the quality of the data. So you handle data like it's a precious asset. If you handle data like it is garbage, garbage is what you get out of it. So you make sure that you twist and turn it, you maneuver it, you process it, clean it, whatever else, in order to get a good view of the business reality or the business truth. So you don't do a good job of working with this data to clean it enough, you'll never get good outcomes out of AI itself. Of course, there are a plethora of models that are out there in the machine learning, artificial intelligence, data science space. And I think everything has become very accessible today, which is great. But I think that's where one of my earlier clients used to talk about smelling the data. He used to really say, look at and start smelling the data. So being able to experiment with data, multiple iterations of trying different things on the data is both a science and an art. And the more time you can spend doing those experimentations, the more refined your results might be. That is something that we should keep doing with customers. We should always make it upfront to them that don't expect that this is an SAP implementation or a typical system implementation where everything is linear. You just do all the if else statements and then you deploy and everything will work perfectly. It never happens. Data will have challenges. Models may not give you the results you expected. You started with some hypothesis, something else turns out to be true. All of those things are going to happen, and we have to try to reason with it. And the fourth aspect, and the most important aspect, and just a bit of a shocking statistic for anyone interested, these are Gartner statistics. They say that about 85% of all the AI work that kicks off does not hit production. It does never gets productionized. Of the one that gets productionized, less than 30% actually gets adopted. So there is so much more to be done in this space, and adoption, working with your business stakeholder to help them understand the outcome, understand the insights, what action can they take, is a critical step. And these were the things that we used to focus on to make sure that we are making AI useful for the user who needs those insights.
Yeah, so an agent model, essentially, really looking at who's going to absorb the data. That's pretty good, actually. I love that. Okay, so now we come to your current passion, which is
Right?
LatentView, your current company, and it seems to be perfect because from everything we talked about today, right? It feels like everything culminates to the moment that we're in right now because your previous experience from process engineering, data analytics, supply chain experience, AI, ML, all of that seems to culminate now in
Yeah.
LatentView. Maybe you can quickly, before we really talk about LatentView and what you do on a daily basis, maybe you can quickly explain what LatentView is, who LatentView is and
For sure. Well, LatentView is a pure play data analytics solutions and service provider, headquartered with a large base here in India, in Chennai on the East Coast, with a significant presence in the US, both on the West Coast and the East Coast of the US, and with clients across the US, Europe, and so on. We are the only public listed data analytics company in the Indian stock market. We listed in 2021 and we had the record of being the most oversubscribed stock in the Indian market back then. What we do is, the way I like to describe is, we live, breathe, eat, sleep data, and data, that's what we do. Wherever there are practical applications of data, analytics, AI, and the whole gamut of solutions and services that can help solve business problems. Not AI for the sake of AI, but AI for the sake of solving business problems is how we would describe ourselves and what we've been doing. We specialize in customer analytics, marketing analytics, supply chain analytics, and then other kinds of operations analytics in finance, HR as well. But our bread and butter has typically been customer marketing and supply chain analytics as the core areas where a lot of our customers come to work with us. Yeah, that's a bit about. We're about 1,700 people today globally, medium-sized organization that's we put our head down and we get to work and we work. We enjoy working with data and delivering business outcomes. Yeah.
Yeah. And when preparing for this, the one thing that really struck out to me looking at the LatentView homepage was in your FAQ section, you directly call out, okay, what challenges might I face during the implementation? How can we overcome them? And I would say not everybody likes to directly market challenges, but it makes you so relatable. And it also shows that you really know what you're talking about when it comes to AI. So not everybody would do that, but I personally like this a lot. I appreciate this. Also, the way you talked today about AI, it was very clear that you have lived I would call it the process of adopting
Yeah.
AI. So why did LatentView and you also the way you communicate choose to be open about the challenges when it comes to AI and already work on providing resolutions to that directly from the start? Because I get it. I think it's right.
I think one part of it comes from the DNA of the organization. If you look at our founders and some of our leaders who've been around in the organization for quite a while, Both the founders come from premier institutions in India from their educational background, have worked in the industry. And then around 2006, they said, data and analytics is a space where there is a lot of potential. Let's get going with that. And then who we have as our chief executive officer, our chief client officer today, they came on board and they've been with us for a while. A lot of this is driven from there that we do good work, but also we be honest and sincere with our customers about, and this is true in most walks of whatever we do, that we are fairly transparent with our customers about things that go well, things that don't go well, and learnings that can come out of it. We run voice of customer surveys twice a year, and it really gives us an opportunity to one, pat ourselves on the back on things we did well, but also hold a mirror to ourselves to say, what did we not do well? We are, like I said, a public limited company, so our books are public. A lot of these things that we do are public, and so we feel like we have a responsibility to our shareholders as well as our client stakeholders to be that honest, open. I also think that it's funny, right? In a world where a lot of things are marketed as this is the best software in the world, I think it's easier to stand out when you're being that open, transparent, and honest. It's just that much more simpler. And clients also are realizing more and more today that a consultant is not this know it all God that they're trying to bring into the organization to work with them. A consultant is someone who has some learnings and experiences. The more mistakes the consultant has made, the more the learnings they have. And then the organization has also experimented, has also done their own learning. So when these two learnings can come together, the outcomes you can deliver to a client are much more enhanced. So organizations also look for, there's no perfect solution in the world. The more imperfect, they'd rather have that much more effort and sincerity in somebody being focused on delivering an outcome for you than somebody coming with a perfect solution, because perfect solutions don't exist. So I think that's the
Yeah,
simple answer to it.
perfect. I love that. Again, great. So you have personally worked in and also helped many different fields in supply chain. Again, you said you run around in distribution centers, warehouses, logistics is a big part. You're focused heavily on the procure to pay process, but also supply chain. All of this already happened. But now looking maybe not only at things that you're doing right now, but in general, what are some of the maybe underexplored or completely unexplored territories of supply chain management where AI can make a big difference?
There are three areas that really excite me. These are areas where with every passing day, I'm also trying to build my own knowledge, understanding, depth around this. These are areas I push my team to also continue to build more depth around. I think one is when the generative AI wave came through, I was not that excited about it for supply chain. I was like, yeah, it's nice. You ask a chat GPT, you upload some data on it, it gives you some summary. Okay, nice. But when the agentic world came into the picture, like the agentic AI, where you can instruct and it generates its own little workers who go execute multiple different intelligent tasks and then give you back results. I said, yeah, this can be a bit of a game changer in supply chain. I could see a few typical processes that take hours to do in for different personas on the ground, and then don't get you suboptimal or don't get you great results. Those things could be significantly transformed with agentic AI. So that's one area I am really excited about or interested in looking at. And the second area that is going to be critical and organizations should really think of investing in is what we call network resilience, both on the supplier side as well as on your distribution side. On the supplier side, one problem we've identified is most manufacturing organizations, they do know who their tier one set of suppliers are. But do they know who the tier twos are who are supplying to the tier ones? Do they know the tier threes supplying to the tier twos? And so on. So whether it is trade and tariffs or it is some disruption or a ship turning sideways in the Suez Canal or some earthquake hitting some part of the world, do we really know the ripple effect of it on our manufacturing? How resilient are we to that? And similarly, on the forward logistics side, on the distribution side, one of your plants just goes down and it's not able to produce volume. How will it affect your ability to service your customer? That end-to-end resilience is something organizations should think about. The third area that excites me is the space of digital twins and the application of AI to digital twins, being able to reconstruct your network assets and network into digital replicas, and then being able to simulate things. Say, change one thing and see what happens, change five things and see what happens. Those are areas that I think have exciting applications from AI.
Yeah, no, I would wholeheartedly agree. I have another question on
Sure.
AI now that I have an expert here. LatentView on the homepage also talks about a data-centric approach for human-centric decision when it comes to AI, right?
Yeah.
So again, an AI company talking about humans making the decisions is very interesting in concept because a lot of people say all is going to be done by AIs. So what is your own and LatentView's view on the human in the loop when it comes to AI human interaction?
I think right through our evolution in the AI journey, we've always spoken about this as augmented intelligence, that you build intelligence that augments decision makers. Now, naturally, if you start mapping out a decision maker's day in the life journey, there are so many things that are redundant that they end up doing because it was not available in an automated, intelligent manner. A lot of those things I think will get cut out because you can just be more efficient with your time and focus on, if you're a supplier relationship manager, instead of sitting and working through data to try and figure out which supplier supplies what to which other supplier and where the risks are, you have a system here that can actually tell you that based on the network resilience problem I just spoke. But you as the human can now get better insights out of that tool and have better conversations with your suppliers, more meaningful conversations. So what we think is that by bringing this approach of map the journey of the decision maker and their day in their life, and then embed that with better intelligence so that they can take better decisions, we are helping that human in the loop to do a to up move up the value chain themselves in the kind of decisions that they have to take. I think that's going to be the role of AI. Naturally, with it happened in multiple revolutions that have happened. In the industrial revolution, there were many jobs that did, of course, become redundant because the use of human time to do, or human skills to do those jobs was not required. So the tech revolution, again, there was a bunch of things that moved on. I think similarly with the AI revolution, there will be things that we've been doing, we just been habitual to doing it, which we don't need to anymore. It's interesting. We were planning a vacation when my wife was like, just ask Chat GPT to create an itinerary for you. And I am a bit of a lazy guy. I said, no, I'll try and just search. She said, no. She did a Gemini and the whole thing just came up and we are following that itinerary. Something that had taken me a week to do is there in minutes. But it's fair, right? I'm now have more time to enjoy what I'm going to do at the vacation. That's the human in the loop being even better insights. I think that's what happened even in industry, in my opinion.
Yeah. I still have to do my vacation planning actually. So I'm definitely going to steal that
Gemini does
idea.
pretty well, you say.
I would have thought about this even. So because we know what we want, but not exactly where to go. And so I can give the criterias and then say, give me options. That's great. Yeah, I'm definitely going to do that. But having talked about my personal life, I want to talk real quick about your
Sure.
hobby because I do know that you are an avid football fan, rooting especially for Manchester United in England. So for you, what does football and supply chain data and analytics have in common?
I don't know if I thought of it to that extent, but I've played football since I was And for the wider audience, if you recognize it as soccer, I played football /
Yeah.
soccer since I was about 7 years old. A lot of the learnings from football was around determination, perseverance. I was a defender and more of a lesser skilled, higher determination type of a defender. So that's what I've spent my time. But the more I have evolved and the more I've thought about it, the role of analytics and supply chain to how it relates to football, I should always be fascinated by this one position in football, which is the deep lying midfielder. The I forget the name that they use for that position, but basically he's the one who controls the beat of the whole game, tempo
Yeah.
of the whole game. Michael Carrick and Shabby Alonso and players like that. And I feel like in many ways they are the brains behind the team that decide how the ball moves, where it moves in its way to the goal. In many ways, analytics has that role in that it's that silent engine that's running in the back, constantly trying to guide the movement and the orchestration of the whole supply chain game, if you will. And which
Mhm.
part moves where is something that position operates. And if you think of some of the best managers in football, the Guardiola and others have come from that position, having had that analytical ability to think of how the game is played. That's something I find quite fascinating in translation from football to analytics and supply chain.
The Germans call it position number
Position number,
6, I
yeah.
think, because it's like one goalie, then
Yeah.
4 in front of him, and then he's the 6th one, essentially. That's why in German you would call it position number
I think the
6.
word I was looking for in Italian football is called regista, R-E-G-I-S-T-A,
Uh-huh.
regista. So the trequartistas are the attacking three, but the regista is the one who controls the game.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually good. I don't know. Fun fact, maybe for everybody, you might know that Germany won a World Cup recently. And that was on the basis of having a partnership with SAP, where they used advanced technology to analyze their own matches and their own performance of players live during the game, but also their competition after their matches. So they used a lot of data and analytics to win the 2024. No, it was not 2024 World Cup. But anyway, and everybody remembers Brazil, right? There was a famous match, I guess, in the half finals against a nation. I don't want to talk too much about it. I have a friend who still suffers. Yeah.
Right.
Cool. My friend, Sunder, thank you so much for doing this. This was great. We're unfortunately running out of time, but I hope you had a good time here with us at Supply Chain
Oh, I
Pioneers.
loved it. I enjoyed the conversation, the nice exchange, and the warmth with which the conversation went. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you. So, for everybody who's listening or watching, or however you're enjoying this podcast, I want to just say, have a nice day wherever you are, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
This was Supply Chain Pioneers. Thanks for watching, listening, or however you are enjoying this podcast. You can find Supply Chain Pioneers on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all other major podcast players, as well as on YouTube at Ulf Talk Supply Chain. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. See you next time.